Welcome to a 32,000 bird free-range poultry shed in the southwest of Scotland, where we speak to farmer Thomas, who's going to tell us about how he designed and manages his range to help him keep birds happy by allowing them to express their natural behaviour.
We started running free-range poultry just over 8 years ago now. We've got a 32,000 layer free-range egg unit here, split into two halves. So this is 16,000 here. We've got a packing station in the middle and 16,000 on the other side. Free range is the way the egg market is going. When we built it, and a lot of packers were wanting to diversify their sheds out, so they gave someone like us the opportunity to lower their risk of disease, and that's why we took the opportunity and we've put a shed up onto our current farm. The benefits of free range are, the main one is they get more space. They're getting access to the range, and in that they also get access to vegetation, natural daylight. They're outside, especially in the summer months. It works perfect for the birds. You see them roaming around, just pecking at bits of grass, giving them more things to disrupt. The natural behaviour allows them to use their natural behaviour, what they would be. That allows them to avoid feather pecking and turning aggressive towards each other when they get to other objects to distract themselves on and play. So when we were building this shed and designing the range, because it was our first shed, we went and seen a few different ideas. A lot of people, they just have a little bit of concrete outside and then it's just stone and drainage for the first few metres, and then it all has to be pasture. You can't put any crops or anything. It has to be pasture. We have to plant some trees. They get 32 acres all in of range, and the main thing we liked about it is we concreted the first section. It added a lot more cost, but it allows us to come in with road brush and keep it clean. To be honest, I think if we were to do it again, we wouldn't actually do the concrete. We would still concrete the first metre out from the shed just to keep that area clean, and then it would just be stone and well drained, well managed area, because you want to keep this area dry for when the hens go back in the shed. If the hens have got wet feet when they go back in, the litter turns wet and then that becomes a problem in itself. So it's very important to keep good drainage around it outside of the potholes. From there on, you just want a good grass vegetation, shelters and trees. We have to put in artificial shelters when we first set up the shed. Anything that encourages the bird out into a natural shaded area. The reason we do that is when we plant the trees, obviously trees are small and they don't provide enough natural shade. As we can see now, some of the trees are starting to grow a bit and they're going to start giving that natural shade, so the shelters, their time will come. But for the first kind of 5 to 10 years, you're going to need that when you're setting up a range. Just to encourage birds out. A few folk might say, oh, why don't you try feeding them outside? The big no-no on feeding outside is it will encourage wild birds into your range, and that's not what you want. From a disease point of view, that's a huge biosecurity risk. To do that, again, you can encourage all the water for the birds. We want good drainage out here, again, not just to keep the birds' feet dry, but you don't want the birds drinking any water. Dirty puddles of water are full of bacteria, full of parasites, and cause big issues with the birds. So you want to keep good drainage. You don't want to water them outside, and you don't want to feed them outside for these reasons, because you're just going to encourage other problems. So it's important to encourage the birds out via artificial shelters, good range management and good tree diversification, and just get them out early. But you definitely don't want to be feeding or allowing them to drink water outside. All we can do is encourage them. So the biggest thing you can do there is just keep the range short, keep the shelter staggered out, and then get them out early. They're the main things to encourage the birds out. Then weather and their own natural behaviour will have to take over from there. Another thing important with free range, on top of drainage, shelters and planting the trees, you want to get them out early. So our birds will arrive in at 17-18 weeks. You really want them to be out within the first 2 weeks of being housed. Ideally we a week to settle in, and then the potholes gradually open, because when they're getting reared, they're not in a free range system, so it's a big change. So gradually open the potholes, let them that natural daylight, and then that plays a big factor in helping them and encouraging them out for the future of the flock. Weather dependent, obviously, if they arrive and it's snowing or it's really wet, windy, or winter flocks, when they arrive, it can be a bit harder to encourage them out, especially when it's a lot colder, but summer flocks tend to do fantastic, just because the temperature change isn't as drastic for them, and you get that consistency of the potholes being open every day, whereas the winter it can chop and change regarding on the weather. When we've got the shelters and we're setting up the range, I think the law requires you to have 4 shelters per hectare. We try to keep them closer to the range, because obviously, and then stagger them further out as you go. Obviously, if you put them down the far end, the birds can't see it. So you want them to look out the potholes, see the shelters, and then that encourages them to then go into there and then further explore. We used a whole range. We had some old fencing, the stock bits of fencing, just wood, 2 metres by 2 metres, planked on top of some pallets. We also used some of the old tin, just the spare tin from when we were building the shed. Again, it just works as you keep it low down, it's just to encourage the birds out. It doesn't have to be the most fancy shelter in the world, it just has to be a shelter to protect them from the sun, and then give them confidence that they're safe out on the range, so that they don't all stay in the shed. The main part is to encourage them. Whilst we're letting the trees and natural shelters grow, you need these staggered 4 per hectare out to encourage the birds out. Wood works well, but it can rot. We use some old tin, but it's subject to storm. It's a bit lighter, so you have to really fix them down well, which we've found. But you can use a whole range of things. We've got some bale trailers just to put on the concrete, or old farm equipment you're not using that time of year, because it's simple, it's movable, and we're only using it for a couple of days of the year from our carton bales. So around the time that classes as a shelter, and it's very efficient, you can move it around. It encourages the birds out, especially when you can park it outside the pothole to get them out in the first place, and then encourage them out further after that. When you're setting up your shelters, you do want to stagger them, so you want more up close and then stagger them further away, just to kind of get the birds. It just keeps attracting the birds out like a step-by-step basis. So again, when it comes to setting up your shelters, we just put a stab in the ground with some pallets on top or some bits of tin sheeting. Quite easy to take out and move around. It's not permanent concreted in. They're very, very flexible with the range. Again, sometimes using trailers and stuff, you can move them and jig them about as well. So it can be little things that do a big difference.
There is no minimum artificial shelter size, but they have to be a proportionate size to the range and the size of the flock. For a 32,000 bird unit, artificial shelters should be about 2 metres long and around 1 metre high. It's recommended that the shelters have a solid roof, but the shelters do not need to have sides on them. Mature hedges and trees can also be counted as natural shelters.
Obviously, when we plant our vegetation and trees, you want all your range in grass. You want to keep the grass relatively low. We use cows to just keep everything grazed, and then try and get the birds out as well, because grass itself, long grass, can act as a barrier, but it's a good vegetation. Grass is a good crop. We're in the west of Scotland here, so it works really well for fast growing, keeping the range cover, so it stops getting muddy, and gives the birds a good vegetation. They like to peck away at the wee seeds. It also, for keeping the range down, it's easy to mow. Cattle can graze it in between times, or sheep, if you've got sheep on your farm as well. So in terms of keeping covers down, it's a very easy thing to manage on the range. Very good at growing back. When it comes to planting trees, we used a mix of conifers and non-conifers, just because conifers evergreen, they provide a lot more shelter and from wind and rain once they get up and going. Non-conifers are a bit faster growing, and they give a nice mix as well to the range, a bit more aesthetically pleasing, but they're a bit faster growing. The faster growing types were actually non-conifers, so we planted a few willows, a few beech trees, all sorts. We've actually just put some beech hedges in last winter as well, so we're always trying to do a wee bit more as we go. Most of the trees were planted in 2018, it was a very dry summer, so we had to replant the next winter to get them going again. But once you get them established and going up to 6 feet high, they seem to take over from there. They don't take too much looking after that. A good advantage of the conifers as well is the cattle don't eat them. So they don't scratch their heads, they don't peck away, so you can mix them in quite well without having to worry about them too much. And yeah, like I say, windbreaks, they give good windbreaks and shelter for winter months as well as the summer. Obviously still quite small at the minute, but once they get up and going, they should start growing rapidly from here on out and provide good cover.
Electric wires can be used to manage cattle and sheep grazing on the range and to prevent them from accessing the hen houses, as long as they don't prevent the birds from freely accessing the range areas. The use of electric wires is not recommended inside the hen house, with the exception of temporary use to prevent birds from laying in corners and to reduce the risk of smothering when first introduced to the house. They must not be placed in front of pop holes. However, if this is unavoidable, then wires at pop holes must be insulated and should be removed within 3 weeks. Thank you for watching part 1 of our range management video. Please join us again for part 2, which will cover pop hole design, stocking densities, rain management and biosecurity.